Oh, hello there. Welcome back. You caught me in the middle of dusting some of my knickknacks. Fascinating creatures, aren't they? Dinosaurs, that is. Even monsters like me love them. Speaking of which, I have another story here for you. Follows a young man who's tasked with surveying his local forest, but he slowly finds out he's being hunted by something that shouldn't exist. So please, grab a seat and your favorite snack and join me for this tale. Now, let's get spooky. So, tell me again, what exactly do you want me to accomplish here? I shouted over the blaring radio. The violent storm raging outside the vehicle made it hard enough to hear without the help of my driver's intense choice of music. It's really simple. Just stay in your tower and study the severity of the storm, as well as any side effects it has on the surrounding wildlife, he yelled back. And why can't you do this? Why hire outside help to do such a simple task? I asked. I was recently let go from my job and found myself desperate for money. I began to look into quick jobs that paid well when I discovered my current employer. On the outskirts of my town is a large forest, simply called Greenridge. And within that forest, there's apparently a small station that's owned by some local animal researchers. The advertisement only requested someone that was willing to work nights and was good with identifying and observing animal behavior. Well, there's only a couple of us, and our previous surveyor decided to quit unexpectedly. The rest of us aren't really trained for this kind of job, as we specialize in other fields of our organization, and we needed someone tonight. Now, I didn't really know much about animals, other than basic information, but I needed the money and they needed an employee. How hard can it really be? I thought to myself. Looking outside the car, I could barely see anything that the headlights didn't illuminate. Pure darkness and silhouettes of trees lined the trail. We then approached my temporary home for the night. As we pulled in, I noticed that the survey station was surrounded by a metal fence, and the station itself was tall, and honestly looked more like a tower. Kind of like a fire watch tower, but smaller. To the far right of the tower was a small building that looked like it could be the station's power supply, as the high voltage warnings seemed to suggest. The far left showed a cabin, and I caught a blurry glimpse of someone standing on the porch. The car came to a stop, and my driver shut off the music. Alright, let's get you set up. Here, take this. He handed me an extra umbrella, and we both stepped outside. I wasn't prepared for just how strong the storm winds were, and nearly lost grip of the umbrella. Getting closer to the building, I could see it was made out of concrete, with a metal staircase that was built along the side. Large lights were on and rested at the top of the structure, which allowed us to properly navigate towards the stairs. I did my best not to slip or lose my footing as we ascended the steps. We reached the top and quickly got inside. Looking around, I took in my surroundings. It was a decently sized square room with large windows running along the sides, as well as a few large switches on the right wall, and a door just opposite of the entrance. The light had an LED bulb which brightly lit the entire area. There was furniture placed around the room, a basic mattress, couch, a few desks, and a chair. Most of the desks had appliances placed on top, a computer, and a monitor that I assumed I would be using to track the wildlife and the storm, as well as a phone. There was a microwave and a small fridge, and a large TV that was placed in a way that I could focus on the monitor and watch movies should I get bored. Alright, the fridge is fully stocked, so help yourself. The computer is really simple to use. We walked over to the monitor, and it quickly booted up. The screen flashed, and shortly after, 9 squares appeared, and I made the connection that these were various camera feeds around the forest. So, your job is to keep these cameras up and running. Should they find anything useful, hit this button here. He pointed to a red button that was labeled Record. Also, write down your findings in this notebook. Now, should the storm or an animal damage the cameras, you are to take this bag and head over to the location where the camera was. He used his foot to slide a large bag out from under the desk. Opening it, I saw a manual created by the organization on how to properly install and repair the cameras. I then saw multiple replacement cams and other electronic parts, as well as a few tools. I nodded and he continued. The keyboard's pretty easy to understand, as we have labels telling you what each key does. Use the arrows to move the camera angles, press the N key to enable night vision, and the flashlight symbol here will activate a bright light by the camera. You get the idea. He turned to the wall with the switches. That's your power grid. Those switches will turn the lights outside either on or off. If the power goes out, mess around with the switches until it comes back on. If that doesn't work, go get Jimmy. He's the dude we saw on the porch. He'll help you repair the main generator that's out by the tower over there. He pointed out the window, and I struggled to see the tower due to the heavy rain. I was only able to make out a flashing red light at the top of the tower. He knows his way around here, so just let him know the situation, and he'll get you taken care of. Oh, and that door over there is the bathroom. He made his way back to the exit and wished me luck. He opened the door, and quite a bit of rain made its way inside. I watched him get in his truck and slowly drive away. I sat on the bed and pulled out my phone, which read 9:37 p.m. I was tasked to stay here until 6 a.m., so I began to make myself comfortable and sat on the computer chair and watched the feed. Just then, I heard a loud bang in the distance outside, and then another, slightly different sounding bang. I calmed myself and realized it was just thunder. I sighed and laughed at myself for getting so spooked. I focused back on the cameras and began searching for anything interesting. Before long, a few hours had passed, and I was starting to feel sleepy. Letting out a yawn, I stood up to go to the bathroom. The rain was still coming down fairly hard, but on the plus side, the thunder had stopped about an hour ago, and the wind didn't sound as harsh as it did before. I finished my business, washed my hands, and sat back down. I had put on one of my favorite movies and was munching on some snacks. I slammed my first energy drink to help me power through the night. Occasionally, I would glance at the feed to see if I could notice anything. It was around midnight when I saw my first signs of activity. A deer came into view of the camera, and I started to focus on that rather than my movie. It was hard to see, even with the night vision enabled, but I didn't want to risk turning on the bright light and scaring the poor thing. Despite the rain, the deer didn't seem bothered by it as it went about its business. That's when I noticed something in the large bushes behind the deer. A pair of eyes gleamed, almost like a cat's eye would through the view of night vision. I went to go zoom in when suddenly, an intense sneeze caused me to bury my face in my elbow for a few seconds. After it had passed, I looked back towards the feed and saw that the deer was gone, as well as those eyes. I used the arrows to turn the camera back and forth. I couldn't find the deer, but before I wrote down what had happened, I did see something stick up from the mud. Zooming in, I could barely make out what looked like a chunk of the deer's antler. I sat back, as I realized that there might be a bear or some other large predator roaming the area. I didn't really have anything that would be particularly useful against a wild beast, so the thought of having to go outside without any real way to defend myself made me shudder. I stopped stressing myself out and filled out a sheet of what I saw and what I think happened. Just as I finished writing, the entire room filled with a sudden loud ringing. I nearly fell out of my chair, and my heart skipped a beat before I saw it was the phone ringing. I sighed and reached over. Hello? I wasn't quite sure how to properly answer, so I figured I'd keep things vague until I knew who was calling. Hey, it's Jimmy. How you holding up, new guy? He had a rough-sounding voice, as if he had spent the whole day screaming. Yeah, I'm holding up fairly well. I'm Brandon, by the way. Nice to meet you, new guy. The disrespect could be felt through the phone as he continued. Well, you're probably wondering why I'm calling you, so I'll get to the point. You seen anything on those cameras yet? I decided to let him know about the disappearing deer. Yeah, there was this deer, but I had looked away for like a second, and the only trace was a piece of its antler, I think. Interesting, because I just found the rest of it. I paused for a moment, waiting for him to explain. The lower half of its body is just a few feet away from my window. It almost looks like an animal was really tearing into it and tossed its body. I want you to keep a lookout on those cameras, and let me know what kind of wild animal is lurking out there. Will do. I'll actually look right now and... I paused for a moment, as I saw one of the camera feeds had been disconnected. One of the cameras is out. What should I do? I said worryingly. If this was a normal outage, I would have grabbed the bag I was shown earlier and went out to fix it. But with the threat of a bear or something else lurking around, I didn't want to take any chances. Don't panic. I'm going to head up to you. See you in a few seconds. He hung up the phone and I sat in silence. Getting up, I walked over to the window and looked out towards the ground. I could barely see Jimmy making his way to the staircase, and before long, he was banging on the door. Letting the rain in once more, Jimmy stepped in. Closing the door behind him, I finally got a good look at my new partner. He was a gruff-looking old man, short white hair with a decently sized bald spot. His beard was white too, looking like it had been recently trimmed. Before I could speak and properly greet him, his piercing brown eyes squinted at me, much like a dad who was getting ready to scold his son. All right, new guy, I'm not going to let another simpleton get himself killed, so here's the game plan. Wait, killed? What are you talking about? I exclaimed. I had no idea death was a very real possibility. I just wanted a simple job that paid well. So, they didn't tell you, huh? All right, go ahead and sit down and I'll explain, he said with a sigh. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, I was hired in with this young guy to study animal behavior in the area, just like yourself now. Well, I ain't big on these computers and stuff. Rots your brain. So I wasn't quite sure why they brought me in with some tech kid. Turned out, they wanted a hunter as well, which I proudly am, and a damn good one at that. I was to sort of protect the surveyor when he needed to be out in the wilderness to fix a camera, or to be a bit more on hands with the animal study. I had extensive animal knowledge and the firepower to defend myself, and the kid had the means to properly catalog all the information we found. Well, one night, it was fairly quiet with nothing but the insects outside making noise, when suddenly, the power cut out. I hopped on the radio to let the kid know, and to my surprise, he told me he was already on his way to the tower to try to fix the generator. I asked him to give me a minute and I'd join him, but he insisted, and by the time I got outside, he was already speeding down the trail. Jimmy placed his hand over his face and sighed some more. I should have done more. Maybe then he'd still be alive. It was about 10 minutes later when I heard him scream. Gripping to my rifle tightly, I sprinted down the trail to the tower. I didn't hear any more screams, and that sprint, mixed with my old age, did a number on me. I was out of breath, but was determined to find the kid. Instead, I found only pieces of his bloody clothing. I was too late. So, we're going to do things my way this time, and I'm gonna hunt and kill this damn predator. Rage lit up in his eyes, and I knew that this was a big deal to him. All right, what do we want to do? I asked, leaning forward a bit. I'm gonna head out to the damaged camera and hide in one of the trees. Once I'm in place, I'll call you to let you know when to come over to the area. I don't want you to be sneaking either. Try to be loud to attract the predator so I can... Whoa, man, I'm not ready to be used as live bait. I'll leave this place before I let any animal tear me to shreds. Relax, kid. I've never missed a shot. Sunshine, raining, snowing, or nighttime don't make much difference to me. I always hit my mark. I just need you to make yourself as identifiable as possible. 1, so I can make sure I don't mistake you in the chaos. And 2, so I know where to look to see if the animal is closing in on you. And should the beast catch you before you get to me, use this on it. Jimmy pulled out a taser and handed it to me. Okay, well, I suppose this is better than just using my bare hands. Thanks. He nodded and got up for the door. Remember, wait for my signal. And with that, he left, letting in even more rain. I leaned back, still in somewhat of a shock. Not only did I find out that the person before me had been killed by a wild animal, but now I had to help hunt that same animal as live bait. I stood up and thought about getting on the radio to tell Jimmy I was going home. But then I remembered something. I was dropped off here, and the only other person with a vehicle was probably Jimmy. Weighing my options, I decided I would stay and help. If nothing else, I may score a hefty paycheck out of this. I could use the dangerous situation to crank up my pay, which, if Jimmy was as good as he said, and with my taser, I could probably walk out of here in one piece, and have some money to hold me over while I looked for a different occupation. I laid on the bed and waited for Jimmy to call. The loud storm outside kept me from dozing off. It was pretty late, so every few minutes, I felt my eyelids close slowly before jolting up whenever there would be a loud thunderclap. It was going on 30 minutes after Jimmy left, and I was honestly getting worried. What was taking him so long, I wondered. I grabbed the radio to call him, but paused and thought of a few scenarios as to why he hasn't called me. First, could be that he encountered the animal and had to escape, but in doing so, dropped his radio and is now trapped out there. 2, he's currently hunting it, and it's too close to risk communicating with me in order to not give away his position. And 3rd, he didn't make it. I didn't want to believe the 3rd possibility, so I decided to take action and tuned out that last thought. I put on my raincoat and scooped up my flashlight and the taser. Screw trying to lug the repair kit out there. I'm more concerned with finding Jimmy and getting out of here. I flung the door open and carefully made my way to the sleek metal stairs. I nearly slipped several times, but managed to get to the bottom unscathed. I squinted around, struggling to make out anything, when I saw the tall tower with the red light and began to head that way. After a few minutes, I arrived at the entrance of the trail that led to the tower. The tall trees and darkness that surrounded me was overwhelming. My stomach dropped a little, but I took a deep breath and headed into the forest. I tried to stay low with my flashlight in one hand and the taser in the other. I did my best to try to listen for anything that sounded like movement, but the storm made it impossible. I had to rely on my sight, which was also practically failing me. Thankfully, it wasn't so bad that I couldn't see the familiar glow of a couple LED lights. I arrived at a small clearing and was relieved when I saw the base of the tower. I began looking around to see if I could find Jimmy. Now that I was closer, I could risk calling him. Jimmy? You there? I'm at the tower generator. Give me a... It was faint, but I heard it. My own voice coming through a different radio. Looking in the direction of the sound, I saw Jimmy's arm holding the radio, as well as a trail of blood leading to a bush in the forest. Before I could do anything, a bolt of lightning hit the generator. Sparks flew everywhere and smoke filled the air. The strike caused the lights to flicker uncontrollably, and I began to panic a little as I lost the direction I came from. As I shined the flashlight around, I stopped at the bush where the trail of blood led. Something was moving. I watched in utter horror as I saw a reptilian-like head pop up from the bush. It had dark green skin and yellow eyes that stared right at me. It had 2 fins that ran alongside each other at the top of its head, and dripping from its chin was blood. Then it stood up fully, and I saw its true size. It was like a deadlier version of an ostrich, or like a featherless cassowary. My mind desperately trying to make sense of what exactly I was looking at. As I stood there, dumbfounded at this bizarre sight, it lunged at me with such impossible speed that I almost didn't have time to dodge out of the way. Making contact with the muddy ground, I heard the creature ram its head into the leg of the tower. Looking at it, I could tell it was a little disoriented, so I used this to my advantage and used my taser to shock the bastard. It let out a screeching roar and flailed its body around, hitting the taser out of my hand. I wasn't about to risk trying to find it, and instead sprinted into a random direction into the forest. I had no idea where I was or where I was going. I was just going to keep running until I felt like it was safe. I wanted to scream at what I had just witnessed, but I knew I couldn't stop, not even for a second. I glanced back just to check to see if it was chasing me, leaving me blind to the steep path that was in front of me. I tripped and fell down the slope, trying my best to move out of the way of the large branches and rocks that were bulging out of the ground. As I landed on more even ground, I tried to stand back up and keep running, but I was so dizzy that I only got a few steps in before falling down again. I would have given anything to just lay there and catch my breath, but I knew if I stayed where I was, that thing would find me. I used a tree to pick myself up and glanced back at the top of the slope. I saw it. The silhouette of the creature that killed Jimmy. A bright flash of lightning illuminated the forest, and I saw and gasped in sheer horror as I finally realized what I was looking at. It was a dinosaur. Some way, somehow, I was staring at a real-life dinosaur. It stared at me, or at least I assume it was. It was still hard to see even though the storm was starting to let up. After a few seconds, it turned around and ran back into the forest. I wasn't about to wait around and see if it was going to find an easier way to get down to me. I turned to the opposite direction and started to run, but with more caution this time. Minutes went by as I desperately tried to find a way out of this forest. I didn't recognize anything around me, and I really had no grasp on how far the forest stretched. Every step was either leading me towards safety or closer to my death. When I was ready to collapse from exhaustion, I saw a faint light in the distance. This gave me the energy I needed to push forward. Getting closer, I saw a small building. Someone's home from the looks of it. Why is there a house all the way out here? I thought to myself, but I shook it off. I didn't care why, I just knew I was safe. I ran up to the front door and pounded as hard as I could. Hello? Anyone, please help me! I shouted, continuing to knock as loud as I could. I waited for an answer as the rain finally died down. I peered into the large window that was to the right of the door, but I couldn't see anyone. I went back to the door, constantly looking over my shoulder. Never in my life had I been so on edge. I began to hear things around me in the bushes and trees. If one dinosaur was roaming around, were there others? What if this was a government experiment and I had been drugged? I tried for the door handle before I got lost in my thoughts and hoped the door was unlocked. Miraculously, it was, and I headed into my new sanctuary. Is anyone here? I need help, please! I yelled out. I looked around and saw a standard living room setup. Sofa in the middle with an ugly rug beneath it, and a recliner beside it. A large television was resting on the wall across from the furniture. On the other side of the room, I saw a door that was left open, revealing a bathroom. I saw another door that was closed, and looking down, I was in disbelief. A small trail of blood ran underneath the door. I got closer, closing the front door behind me. Most likely whoever was behind this door was attacked by the dinosaur, and came in here to try to hide from it. Hello? Anyone in there? Silence. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The stench hit me first before I could see where it was coming from. I hadn't noticed the smell before, probably just because I was so relieved to not be in immediate danger. The room I entered was some sort of office, with a desk and a monitor facing away from me. I saw the trail of blood go behind the desk, and walking over, my suspicions were true. There was a dead body. I briefly took in the gruesome sight. This poor man had a sizable chunk of flesh ripped away from his side. I had to turn to throw up. After a few minutes of trying to compose myself, I looked back at the desk and saw the computer was on. It appeared to be showing a series of emails. Thinking this was the best chance I had to get help, I went to message the individual the deceased man was presumably contacting. Before I started to type, the subject of the email caught my attention. Before this guy died from blood loss, he was also attempting to send out a message. I don't know how much time I have left, but we need to cancel this project. The containment team is dead and I'm all that's left. Several of the subjects escaped the testing area. The dialogue got me. They are way more intelligent and dangerous than we predicted. Get rid of the human test subjects, capture the assets, and close the gate until we get this thing under control again. Don't let them... The email wasn't finished, as I assumed the man died before sending. His bloody handprint was smeared across the keyboard. Before I could do anything, I heard the front door open. "George! Damn it, George, you better be in here!" A man's voice came from the living room. I quickly but carefully opened the door. "Please, sir, you have to help me. There's been a..." The man quickly pulled out a revolver and aimed it straight at me. Shit. You never were supposed to make it this far. Wait, please, I need... Sorry, we can't have any witnesses. I can only assume you saw what was lurking in the woods. You probably went snooping around on that computer that's in there too, huh? He began to squeeze the trigger, and I dropped to the floor. Without a second to spare, a bullet was shot, barely missing me. I had little time to think of a plan. I couldn't run back into the office as there was no way out, so I had no choice but to try to get to the back door. With him standing in the way of the front door, that was my only escape. I stood up quickly and ran for the exit, only this wasn't like the movies. The moment I stood up, I heard 2 gunshots followed by an intense pain in my right arm. I stumbled back on the wall, clenching my bloody arm. Please, I begged, but he didn't budge. He aimed the gun right at me, and just before he pulled the trigger, a loud crash came from the front window. The Dilophosaurus shattered through the window, landing on the mysterious man. As he turned, he managed to shoot the dinosaur, but only grazed its left eye, an act that only pissed the creature off rather than slow it down. It bit right into the man's neck as they both collapsed onto the floor. I saw the revolver slide across the room as the man desperately tried to wrestle the beast off. This was my only chance to escape. Ignoring the pain as best as I could, I ran over and grabbed the gun and burst through the front door. I was blinded a little by seeing a pair of bright headlights facing the house. It was the man's Jeep, which, luckily for me, was still running. I made my way to the driver's side when I looked back and saw that the Dilophosaurus was staring at me while perched on the broken window frame. Blood dripped from its jaw and bits of flesh hung from its mouth. It screeched as I got inside the Jeep and sped off. I focused on trying not to smack into any of the trees or large rocks, swerving constantly. I glanced over for just a moment to see the dinosaur was keeping up with me. Because I had no clear path, I wasn't able to go any faster. I had to hope I could shake it somehow. I looked over once again to see if I lost the creature, and, to my surprise, I did. I let out a sigh of relief as I looked forward, only to see a large boulder sitting right in front of me. I tried to avoid it, but I wasn't able to react quick enough. The Jeep's side smacked into it just enough to throw the vehicle off balance. I began to panic as I wasn't able to get control of the situation. Seconds later, the Jeep slammed into a tree. The sudden impact of the airbags hitting my face disoriented me as the engine slowly died from the crash. All I could do was sit there as I desperately tried to get my bearings. Dazed, I looked out the window and saw the dinosaur sprinting full speed at my door. Shit, I yelled as I wrestled with the seatbelt. I got it loose just as the head of the dinosaur crashed through the window and shards of glass pelted my face. I flung myself over to the passenger seat, but not quick enough as my foot was soon in the jaw of the dinosaur. I screamed in pain as I tried to kick it off, but every hit seemed to only piss it off more. It began to drag me through the window, with unbelievable pain shooting through my whole body. I began to grab a hold of anything to prevent me from being pulled out completely. It yanked its head back several times, nearly pulling my leg out of its socket. Just when I was ready to accept my fate, I looked down and saw the revolver. I quickly grabbed it and aimed it forward. I prayed that whatever bullets were left would be enough to kill the beast. I lined the barrel of the gun with the dinosaur's head and pulled the trigger. My ears were ringing as I stared at the dead dinosaur, its head laying inside the Jeep, jaw still clenching my bloody leg. I yelled some more as I pried its mouth open, finally freeing myself. After a few minutes of using different parts of my clothes to make a temporary bandage, I laid back and tried my best to ignore the intense pain. How am I going to make it out of here? I thought to myself. There would be no way I could travel back to the tower, or to Jimmy's cabin to call for help. The reality of the situation began to set in as my eyelids grew heavier with every passing second. Just before passing out, I heard two voices approaching quickly. "Found the crash! Come on! They might need some help!" a man's voice said as I saw beams from a flashlight shine through the shattered window. "I hope they're alright and got... Wait, what the hell is that?" A woman's voice this time. She must have seen the dead dinosaur. Help! Help me!" I strained to yell out. I fell unconscious before seeing what happened next. I woke up in an ambulance as the paramedics assured me I was going to be alright once they saw me waking up. The next few days were a blur, but ultimately they were able to save me and stitch up my leg. I'm currently waiting to be released, but as I sit here, I see a couple of officers outside my room talking to my doctor. No doubt they plan to question me on what happened, but what do I even say? Unless they found the body of the dinosaur, they would never believe me. Regardless of what happens next, I'm typing out this story to expose what's going on in our town forest. Even if no one believes me, I can rest easy knowing I did what I could to tell people about what I saw that night in the Greenridge forest. Oh, that was intense. I do wonder what happened to that dinosaur's body, though. None of our concern. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed tonight's story. Now hurry home before it gets too late outside. And as always, you're more than welcome to come back. I have plenty more tales to share with you. Good night, and stay spooky.